560theanswer.com, on the AM560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Michael Schellenberger, we've spoken about him before. We've spoken to him before. He, as you may have noticed over the last couple of months, is one of the Twitter Files journalists that's been providing those Twitter threads that detail exactly what was going on behind the scenes at Twitter and other social media companies, but specifically Twitter. He's written books. He's an environmental activist, like, for his entire life, but he offered that mea culpa a couple of years ago, apologizing for contributing to environmental hysteria. He's a really thoughtful, interesting guy. Books he's written include Apocalypse Never and San Francisco. He was on with Joe Rogan, and he gave us a little bit more context and color on the Twitter Files, and also the timeline, where this story really starts, and an explanation of how we got from where it started to where we are now. Take a listen.
But over time, we just kept finding, like, this weird, like, FBI wants us to do this. You know, there's these other government agencies. Oh, you know, this all these people used to work at the FBI. The CIA shows up, Department of Homeland Security, and we're kind of like, what the hell is going on? And the story quickly shifted from us sort of, and I think what Elon thought, which was that it was just very progressive people being biased in their content moderation and their censoring, to there is a huge operation by U.S. government officials, U.S. government contractors, and all of these super sketchy NGOs getting money from who knows where, basically demanding that Twitter start censoring people. And at that moment, the story shifted for all of us. And that was, I think, where Taibbi became particularly important and sort of the lead, because he had had so much experience on sort of looking at how the U.S. government during the War on Terror had waged disinformation campaigns, propaganda campaigns, and it became clear to us, you know, over time that the U.S. government had turned its propaganda and disinformation campaigns that it had been waging abroad, it turned them against the American people, and that was where you just sort of get chills up your spine, and you were like, this is something seriously sinister is going on.
So how the Twitter Files reporting evolved from a bunch of leftists inside Twitter curating content based on the nature of the politics of a particular post or poster, to the federal government's intervention, and now a little bit more backstories. Now take it one step back, as Schellenberger was just alluding to, and then he explained, go back to the response to 9/11 and the War on Terror.
You know, it really, what you're looking at is the apparatus that was created by the War on Terror over the last 20 years, starting after 9/11. Then there was a battle against ISIS, because ISIS was successfully recruiting on social media. So there was sort of a counter-ISIS recruiting campaign that occurred. Then you get the big event is Brexit 2016, Trump's election in 2016, and the establishment just freaks out. Absolutely freaks out. And there's a lot of different motivations here. So one of the motivations is just to blame Facebook, blame social media for Trump's victory. It was never true. I don't really think anybody really believed it. There's just, you know, there was just, for a variety of reasons we can talk about, there was never any good evidence that whatever Russians did had much of any influence, any measurable influence on the outcome of the campaign. But they started to scapegoat the social media companies as a way to get control over them. And so then in 2017, they set up, well, two things happen, or many things happen. The Department of Homeland Security just declares election infrastructure to be part of their mission of protecting election infrastructure, and that meant protecting the media environment. Protecting. Put that in quotes, you know. Yeah. It's creepy. It's patronizing. It's a power move. So that's the first thing that happens. They create something called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security to supposedly protect the media environment from foreign influence. They create something called the Foreign Influence Task Force with the FBI to basically start policing domestic speech on these platforms.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Jacob Siegel, senior writer for Tablet Magazine, co-host of Manifesto, a podcast. Jacob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you've written on this topic as well, a piece, a guide to understanding the hoax of the century. This is the disinformation hoax that Schellenberger is sort of unpacking for us. Does he have in your estimation, does he have sort of the timeline and the collaboration correct?
Yeah, I think he's done a great job with this, and I think he's got it right in the broad strokes. I believe that the infrastructure that he's describing was maybe more purposefully built. That's my interpretation, and less opportunistically built in a way than perhaps what you might get from hearing that description. In other words, something like the federal seizure of the electoral infrastructure that he's describing, in my opinion, has the hallmarks of being part of a larger coordinated effort operating under the auspices of disinformation that was really a way of trying to enforce a one-party orthodoxy inside the United States.
And so his description of the establishment's reaction to Donald Trump, all hands on deck, because what we're attempting to do, or whether whether it was purposeful, like you say, or it was something that evolved. Regardless, both of those starting points came to the same end point, which is, this is what people saying, this is what we're talking about, something like Trump, an exogenous shock to the system that has to be prevented, all hands on deck.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And I make the same point in my piece in Tablet. And this is not just Michael Schellenberger and I saying this. Of course, if you go back and you revisit the statements from 2015, 2016, this was senior Democratic Party operatives, never Trump Republicans, senior members of the U.S. intelligence community, who were very explicitly treating Trump as a kind of singular, existential, civilizational threat. This was, of course, the language that they were using. And the consequence of that, or the manifestation of that in terms of policy, was that you got this disinformation legislation, first of all, starting with the Countering Foreign Disinformation Act. That was one of President Obama's last things he signed in office, and then continuing through what was described by its leading participants as a whole of society effort. And that was absolutely both triggered by and focused on Donald Trump as an existential threat to the establishment, which saw itself as synonymous with all that was good in civilization.
And so this is the need to characterize Trump not just in the sort of conventional way that Republicans are characterized by the D.C. press corps or political opponents, but he needed to be literally an enemy of the state. He needed to be in bed with enemies of America, and everything that he represented was a national security threat that needed to be dealt with on a much greater level, much higher level.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I mean, I think there was plenty that one could have criticized about Trump. There was plenty of legitimate grounds for criticism of Trump in 2015, 2016. But this exceeded the bounds of politics. It wasn't even comparable to, let's say, standard overheated criticism of Republican candidates coming from a largely liberal media establishment. It went far beyond that. It was a effectively militarized operation, And the fact that it could be pulled off so successfully, and that it was in essence a whole of society effort, as it was designed to be, this response to Trump, I think speaks to the fact that there really were multiple sectors of, the most powerful sectors of American society who did see Trump as an existential threat. And they saw him that way for a variety of reasons. Some of it was self-interest. He, threatened the business interests of, corporations that were, doing business with China. His immigration policy, his threat to end foreign wars, his threat to pull out of NATO. All of this triggered this kind of apocalyptic response.
Right, and so so then the reaction from conservatives, one of the maybe not reaction, but one of the lessons is skepticism, and I lesson learned too, because after 9/11, the war on terror, we're all in to protect America, to never have a domestic terrorist, never have a foreign terrorist attack on our soil, to hold the people responsible accountable. And so there wasn't the scrutiny, to what Congress was doing bumped up against the Constitution by many of us, some libertarians, but by many of us, and I think we have to own that. And so now, as skeptical as we were of the media coming into the Trump era, and now it's just, the D.C. press corps is just dismissed out of hand for good reason. Now we almost have to treat the national security establishment with the same skepticism, and that's an unusual position for conservatives historically, but it's one we have to come to based on the evidence. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And I would just say that for people who are wary of that, there is a precedent, and you can find, real anti-communist, liberal Cold Warriors like Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who were the leading critics of U.S. intelligence agencies, just a few decades ago, not because they doubted the righteousness of, the fight against communism, but because they recognized the threat to democracy coming from opaque, secretive, unaccountable, undemocratic, militarized administrative agencies with boundless power and no accountability. And George Kennan, another staunch Cold Warrior, issued similar warnings, as of course did Dwight Eisenhower, who was hardly a hippie.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would confuse Ike with being a hippie. That's good. Jacob Siegel, senior writer for Tablet Magazine, co-host of Manifesto, a podcast. Do check out his column at Tablet, A Guide to Understanding the Hoax of the Century. Jacob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Hi, this is Maria and Diane with the Del Bacchio Marchetti Group of App Properties Christie's International. We wanted to tell you why we placed number 9 in Illinois as the top producing real estate team and number 1 in Arlington Heights.
In the past 9 years, we assisted 1,975 buyers and sellers achieve the American dream of home ownership, selling $720 million in real estate.
If you are considering making a move, we can help you get the most value for your home in today's market.
Maria and I have over 50 years of combined experience. We take a conservative approach in protecting your asset, and we'll give you the direction